Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is the secret doctrine we are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of the secret doctrine with stanza 5, part 2, stanza 5. 18. The first race were the sons of Yoga. Their sons, the children of the yellow father and the white mother. That would be the sun and the moon. In the later commentary, the sentence is translated. The sons of the sun and the moon, the nursling of ether, or the wind. They were the shadows of the lords. They, the shadows, expanded. The spirits of the earth clothed them. The solar lahas warmed them. An example, preserved the vital fire in the nascent physical forms. The breaths had life, but had no understanding. They had no fire nor water of their own. A. Remember in this connection the tabula smaragdina of Hermes. I do not know that one. That's another one I need to look up. The esoteric meaning of which has 7 keys to it. I'm going to do this so I will possibly remember to look it up later. Alright, so of Hermes, the esoteric meaning of which has 7 keys to it. The astrochemical is well known to students. The anthropological may be given now. The one thing mentioned in it is man. It is said, the father of that one only thing is the sun, its mother the moon. The wind carries it in his bosom, and its nurse is the spirituous earth. In the occult rendering of the same it is added, and spiritual fire is its instructor, guru. This fire is the higher self, the spiritual ego, or that which is eternally reincarnating under the influence of its lower personal selves, changing with every rebirth, full of tanha, or desire to live. It is a strange law of nature that on this plane, the higher spiritual nature should be, so to say, in bondage to the lower. Unless the ego takes refuge in Atman, the all-spirit, and merges entirely into the essence thereof, the personal ego may goad it to the better end. This cannot be thoroughly understood unless the student makes himself familiar with the mystery of evolution, which proceeds on triple lines: spiritual, psychic, and physical. That which propels towards and forces evolution, an example, compels the growth and development of man towards perfection, is A. the monad, or that which acts in it unconsciously through a force inherent in itself, and B. the lower astral body, or the personal self. I have different definition for that. The monad is the spirit. It is literally the all. It is that from which all things come. It is the entirety of existence all at once in a snapshot, right? At a standpoint in the field of stasis with no movement. Once there is movement, the monad becomes fohat or logos or whatever. It is 2 sides of the same coin, right? It is not that which acts unconsciously through a force inherent in itself. The former, whether imprisoned in a vegetable or an animal body, is endowed with, is indeed itself that force, owing to its identity with the all force, which, as said, is inherent in the monad, the all force being the spirit, right? The active spirit. All potent, which as said, is inherent in the monad. It is all potent in the arupa, or formless plane. On our plane, its essence being too pure, it remains all potential, but individually becomes inactive. E.g., the rays of the sun, which contribute to the growth of vegetation, do not select this or that plant to shine upon. Uproot the plant and transfer it to a piece of soil where the sunbeam cannot reach it, and the latter will not follow it. So with the Atman, unless the higher self, or ego, gravitates towards its son, the monad, the lower ego, or personal self, will have the upper hand in every case. For it is this ego, with its fierce selfishness and animal desire to live a senseless life, tanha, which is the maker of the tabernacle, as Buddha calls it in Dhammapada 153 and 154. Hence the expression, "The spirits of the earth clothed the shadows and expanded them." To these spirits belong temporarily the human astral selves, and it is they who give, or build, the physical tabernacle of man, for the monads and its conscious principle, manas, to dwell in. But the solar lahas, spirits, warm them, the shadows. This is physically and literally true. Metaphysically, or on the psychic and spiritual plane, it is equally true that the Atman alone warms the inner man. An example, it enlightens it with a ray of divine life, and alone is able to impart to the inner man, or the reincarnating ego, its immortality. Thus, as we shall find, for the first 3.5 root races, up to the middle or turning point, it is the astral shadows of the progenitors, the lunar pitras, which are the formative powers in the races and which build and gradually force the evolution of the physical form towards perfection. This at the cost of a proportionate loss of spirituality. Then, from the turning point, it is the higher ego, or incarnating principle, the nous, or mind, which reigns over the animal ego and rules it whenever it is not carried down by the latter. In short, spirituality is on its ascending arc, and the animal or physical impedes it from steadily progressing on the path of its evolution only when the selfishness of the personality has so strongly infected the real inner man with its lethal virus that the upward attraction has lost all its power on the thinking, reasonable man. In sober truth, vice and wickedness are an abnormal, unnatural manifestation at this period of our human evolution. At least they ought to be so. See, this is completely misunderstanding the point of existence. Right? If vice did not exist, we would be existing like the animals. Right? There would be no cognitive thought. It would just be instinctual. That is quite literally the difference between us and the animals. The fact that we can aspire to overcome the vicious side of our nature, but it is our nature. It is quite literally built into us to partake of the vices and the virtues. You can equally overtake of the vices or the virtues. Right? What does she give an example? No, it just says vice and wickedness, right? It is not abnormal to have sex. That is not abnormal. It is a little bit abnormal to have sex with everything that moves, right? But it's not abnormal to have sex. It is not abnormal to want to accumulate things. It is not abnormal or unnatural to think that you are worth it. It is not abnormal or unusual to partake in eating food for pleasure, right? None of these things are abnormal or unnatural. The overtaking of them pushes the boundaries of normal and natural, right? If you are sitting down and eating 3 giant-sized candy bars, right, that is gluttony. You're not supposed to do that. But there's nothing wrong with eating even a whole giant-sized candy bar every once in a while. Right? There's nothing wrong with accumulating things. You're not meant to give away everything. You are not meant to be destitute. You're meant to find the balance between the virtues and the vices, and you cannot take of the vices if you do not realize that they are not inherently evil, right? The overtaking of them, and yes, there is temptation to overtake them, that is the problem. It's not the fact that it exists. It's not the fact that sexual desire is a thing. It is that you're supposed to restrain your sexual desire into very specific currents of release. It is the same for all of them. There is nothing abnormal or unnatural about any of the vices. You are supposed to partake. You are supposed to use moderation for both the vices and the virtues. You can be too much on the side of the virtues. If you must live a life of a monk on a mountaintop and never have sex and never eat meat. You are doing it wrong. You are failing at life. This entire sentence right here just pisses me off. Simple, and I understand this was 150 years ago, right? We are looking back through the lens of history. We have greater revelations for many things, but this idea, this way of thinking, is the problem with spirituality, right? You're not on a prison planet. You are here to resist temptation. That is a true thing, but not entirely. You are supposed to partake in the virtues and vices. And I've got a whole video on that, the 7 facets of God, where we talk about this in some extreme detail. So I'm going to let it go right now. But this idea right here, this is that victim mentality shit that I'm talking about, right? Well, it is completely unnatural for you to partake in sexual activities. No, it is not. It is entirely natural to have sexual desire. That's why you have it as a natural human being. Back to the text. The fact that mankind was never more selfish and vicious than it is now, that's a fact. That is a fact. Is that a fact, Mrs. Blavatsky? Is that a fact? Is that a verifiable, provable fact? You can state emphatically that there has never, in the entire period of human evolution, been a period of time where people were more selfish and vicious than now. Really? You can say that. Okay, we're not going to talk about the Huns. We're not going to talk about the aggression of the Musclemen into Europe. We're not going to talk about the Crusades. We're not going to talk about world domination that was so prevalent just 100 years before you. We're not going to talk about slavery, which was just gotten rid of as much as it ever was right here in this time period that you're living in, right? We had just fought a war. This is 1888. We had just fought a war to recognize the fact that human beings are not property. We paid a price in blood so that we could give more rights to more people. But yes, absolutely, it is the most selfish and vicious time in history right now. Okay. This is one of those reasons why I emphasize when I read this, I'm like, the fact, right? That is why I emphasize the fact in all of my videos, because most of the time, the thing that is being stated as fact is indeed an opinion. This is an opinion, right? If you were unaware, most of Asia holds Attila the Hun's DNA. Do you know how that got there? It was not through voluntary, willful consideration. The man killed more people than Hitler and Stalin. But somehow, this right now, that's the most vicious time in history. Gotcha. Civilized nations, having succeeded in making of the first an ethical characteristic, of the second an art, is an additional proof of the exceptional nature of the phenomenon. So, an ethical characteristic of selfishness and an art of viciousness. Okay. The entire scheme is in the Chaldean Book of Numbers and even in the Zohar, if one only understood the meaning of the apocalyptic hints. And again, this is another one of those things that she does that is directly contradictory to herself, right? She has spent the first book in this arguing that the Chaldean Book of Numbers actually came from India, and that the Zohar actually came from India. And so, of course, if that is your contention, that these two have the same source, of course it makes sense that they are both going to have the same thing said in them, right? And so what you're doing here, like, I don't know. I haven't read the Chaldean Book of Numbers. I have not read the Zohar. The only thing I have to go off of is literally what I have read in these various studies that we have done. So I don't know if they are line for line the same. I don't know if they have the same information, but your contention is that they are from the same source material. So of course, if they come from the same source material, they are going to contain the same things. Right? And again, I don't know. I haven't read either one of these two, but you have made an argument the entire time that that was true. First comes on Soph, the concealed of the concealed. Then the point, Sephira, and the later Sephiroth. Then the Atzalatic world, a world of emanations that gives birth to three other worlds, called the throne, the abode of pure spirits, the second, the world of formation, or Yetzirah, the habitat of the angels who sent forth the third, or world of action, the Asiatic world, which is the earth, or our world. And yet, it is said of it that this world, also called Klipote, containing the six other spheres, diagram, and matter, is the residence of the Prince of Darkness. This is as clearly stated as it can be, for Metatron, the angel of the second or Briatic world, means messenger. Angel, called the great teacher, and under him are the angels of the third world, Yetzirah, whose 10 and 7 classes are the Sephiroth. Footnote 1. See Volume 1, Part 3, Gods, Monads, and Atoms. It is symbolized in the Pythagorean triangle with the 10 dots within and the 7 points of the triangle in the cube, which I place no weight within, right? Like we talked about the triangle and how to divide the triangle into 10 dots is completely arbitrary. It is somebody just sticking dots where they feel like they should be. Like, I do not place a lot of value whatsoever into the Quran, into the Kabbalah, and so these 10 and 7 Sephiroth, like eventually we may wind up doing a study on the Kabbalah, but for the most part, the source material that they are talking about to me is completely incorrect, and there is no reason to expound upon it. Whose 10 and 7 classes are the Sephiroth, of whom it is said that they inhabit and vivify this world as essential entities and intelligences, whose correlatives and contraries inhabit the third or Asiatic world. These contraries are called the shells, or demons. Footnote 2. Whence the Kabbalistic name of shells given to the astral form, the body called Kamarupa, left behind by the higher angels in the shape of the higher manas, when the latter leaves for Devachan, forsaking its residue. Or demons, who inhabit the 7 habitations called Sheba Hakaloth, which are simply the 7 zones of our globe. Their prince is called in the Kabbalah Samael, the angel of death, who is also the seducing serpent Satan. But that Satan is also Lucifer, the bright angel of light, the light and life bringer, the soul alienated from the holy ones, the other angels, and for a period anticipating the time when they would have descended on earth to incarnate in their time. The souls, monads, are pre-existent in the world of emanations, Book of Wisdom, and the Zohar teaches that in the soul is the real man, in example, the ego and the conscious I am, manas. They descend from the pure air to be chained to bodies, says Josephus, repeating the belief of the Essenes. The air is full of souls, states Philo. They descend to be tied to mortal bodies, being desirous to live in them. Footnote 3. Which shows that the Essenes believed in rebirth and many reincarnations on earth, as Jesus himself did. Well, fact we can prove from the New Testament itself. There's a lot about the New Testament that is misunderstood, because through and in the human form they will become progressive beings, whereas the nature of the angel is purely intransitive. Therefore, man has in him the potency of transcending the faculties of the angels. Hence, the initiates in India say that it is the Brahman, the twice-born, who rules the gods or devas, and Paul repeated it in 1 Corinthians. Know ye not that we shall judge angels? Which, by the way, does not have any biblical foundation whatsoever. Finally, it is shown in every ancient scripture and cosmogony that man evolved primarily as a luminous, incorporeal form. That is not true, over which, like the molten brass round the clay model of a sculpture, the physical frame of his body was built by, through, and from the lower forms and types of animal terrestrial life. That is not what is accounted for in Genesis, either one of the two, and I understand that she believes that in the second one, the soul was given a body. That is not what is stated in it. Fall back to the Bible study. There is a lot of things wrong in those books, but misquoting them does nobody any good. The soul and the form, when descending on earth, put on an earthly garment, says the Zohar. Now, this is an allegory for corporation, right? For when your soul decided to come and incorporate on this planet for purposes, not punishment, you have to put on the 5D navigation device in order to navigate through 5D space. So, this is talking about something that is real, at least in my opinion, according to my speculations, right? There is the body, there is the soul, and there is the spirit. The soul is you. It is the part that makes the decisions for your life. It has amnesia from before it was incorporated, and will probably be relieved of that amnesia after the incorporation is over. I do believe that reincarnation is a thing, but not that you are necessarily paying some debt that was put upon you by your ancestors, right? You are responsible for where you go in your life, and many of the challenges that you face, you chose to go into that family to acquire, right? If you were born in a poor family, it is so you can learn to overcome poverty. If you were born into an abusive family, it is so that you can learn to overcome abuse. Like, you chose that, and that's a hard thing for people to wrap their minds around. But if you don't know me, I've been through a harder life than most, and coming to the realization that it is a soul's progression helps me to understand why some of the terrible things that happened to me had to happen. It's not like you're saying, oh, assault me as a conscious living 5D being. But you did decide to learn the lesson of overcoming the abuse. And so that bottleneck had to happen in your life. Now, there are many caveats to that. We have expounded upon them many times, and if that interests you, the Infinite Integrations playlist is going to be the place to find more on that. His protoplasmic plastic body was not formed of that matter of which our mortal frames are fashioned. When Adam dwelt in the Garden of Eden, he was clothed in the celestial garment, which is the garment of heavenly light. Light of that light which was used in the Garden of Eden. That is from the Zohar, but that is definitely not contained within Genesis. Right now, the Zohar is supposed to be a better explanation of the things which are contained in Genesis. Now, again, I have not read the Zohar, so I cannot verify the veracity of what is being stated here. But I can tell you that this is not what was stated in the Genesis, right? And if you are supposed to take Genesis at face value, which we are if you follow those religions, then this is not in there, like at all, right? At all. Now, we can assume that the climate was perfect, that it was exactly the temperature that people needed it to be, that there was not the penetration of the sun that would burn the skin in the way that we have now, and so they could run around naked, right? But here's something for the evolutionists. I've already stated several times how there is no biological imperative for losing hair and having to replace it with clothing. We've talked several times about how there was a certain evolutionary trait in a giraffe that allows it to live. The valve in its heart, which shuts off when its head goes down. That's one of those things that by the time you evolve it, it is too late, right? By the time you need to turn off the blood flow to your brain so that it doesn't explode your brain, it's already going to explode your brain. You're not going to be able to spontaneously develop this valve. It's the same thing with this, right? If the first ape wandered out and actually decided, you know what, we're going to have sex with these hairless apes, right? Once that selection is made and the children are born, climate is still a thing. And so maybe you're born in the spring and you make it through the spring fairly well. But come summertime, it is going to be hot and the sun is just going to beat you down. You're going to die. Come the fall, it's going to be cold. And if you don't have control of fire, you're going to die really quick. Because where is the learning curve for making clothing? What point do you decide as a hairless animal, right? Just come out of the woods and you're just now, for the first time ever, without hair covering your body and protecting you from the elements. At what point do you decide, you know what, I'm going to kill this other animal and I'm going to take its skin and I'm going to put it on? Where is the function of that becoming a thing? I mean, the very first time that it is a thing, right? This one guy, it's fucking freezing and he kills something and he crawls inside of it and he's like, oh man, I got to stay warm, right? Everybody else is dead. There's nobody else to mate with. There has to be some clothing, like immediately, right after the evolutionary thing, and there's just not time. That leads more towards a guided evolution, in my opinion. Now, I believe that it was not necessarily guided. I believe that there was an electromagnetic emanation which caused a spontaneous mutation across the globe. And then maybe these many groups of hairless, suddenly people come together and get to the point of putting on clothes. But if you're by yourself and you're the first, you don't have the knowledge to draw upon that you can clothe yourself in somebody else's clothes, like skin. Like you just don't have that knowledge intrinsic in you. That is a learned thing. You had to have learned it from somewhere. Back to the text. Man, the heavenly Adam, was created by the 10th Sephiroth of the Esoteric world, by the common power they, the 7 angels of a still lower world, engendered the earthly Adam. First Samael fell, and then deceiving man caused his fall also. I don't believe in this fall, so... And it is funny, right? They were created by the 10th Sephiroth, right? But the power of the still lower world, I thought the Sephiroth were the higher world. B. The sentence. They were the shadows of the Lords. An example, the progenitors created man out of their own astral bodies, explains an universal belief. The Devas are credited in the East with having no shadows of their own. The Devas cast no shadows, and this is the sure sign of a good Holy Spirit. Why had they no fire of water of their own? Footnote. It is corroborated, however, as we have shown by the esotericism of Genesis. Not only are the animals created therein after the atom of dust, but vegetation is shown in the earth before the heavens and the earth were created. Every plant of the field before it, the day that the heavens and the earth were made, was in earth. Now, Unless the occult interpretation is accepted, which shows that in this fourth round the globe was covered with vegetation, and the first astral humanity was produced before almost anything could grow and develop thereon. What can the dead letter mean? Simply that the grass was in the earth of the globe before that globe was created. This is you justifying something that you believe that is in opposition to the text. And yet, the meaning of the verse 6, which says that there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole of the face of the earth before it rained and caused the trees, etc. to grow, is plain enough. It shows also in what geological period it occurred, and further what is meant by heaven and earth. It meant the firmament and dry encrusted land, separated and ridden of its vapors and exhalations. Moreover, the student must bear in mind that, as Adam Cadman, the male and female being of Genesis chapter 1, is no physical human being but the host of the Elohim, among which was Jehovah himself. So the animals mentioned in that chapter as created before men in the dead letter text were no animals, but the zodiacal signs and other sidereal bodies. And this is her belief, and I do not believe that at all. I stand in pretty firm opposition to it, and that is explained by the Bible study. Because, see, that which hydrogen is to the elements and gases on the objective plane is noumenon, is in the world of mental and subjective phenomena, since its Trinitarian latent nature is mirrored in its three active emanations from the three higher principles in man, namely spirit, soul, and mind. Now, to me, that is spirit, soul, and body, or Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. It is the spiritual and also the material human basis. Rudimentary man, having been nursed by the air or the wind, becomes the perfect man later on, when, with the development of spiritual fire, the noumenon of the three-in-one within his self, he acquires from his inner self, or instructor, the wisdom of self-consciousness, which he does not possess in the beginning. Thus, here again, divine spirit is symbolized by the sun or fire, divine soul by water or the moon, both standing for the father and mother of pneuma, human soul or mind, symbolized by the wind or air, for pneuma means breath. Hence, in the Smaragdine tablet, disfigured by Christian hands, the superior agrees with the inferior, and the inferior with the superior, to the effect that one truly wonderful work, which is man, for the secret work of Chiram, or King Hiram in the Kabbalah, one in essence but three in aspect, is the universal agent, or lapis philosophium. The culmination of the secret work is spiritual perfect man. At one end of the line, the union of the three elements is the occult solvent in the soul of the world, the cosmic soul or astral light at the other. And, on the material plane, it is hydrogen in its relation to the other gases. Need to point out once again that science has revealed many things to us, and one of the many things that has been revealed to us through science is that hydrogen did not serve the function that she thought it did. At this point in time, helium was still speculation. Hydrogen was the closest to source gas that was possible to be created, right, through the separation of water and through application of heat to water and the separation of the individualized elements. They had isolated hydrogen. They had still not isolated helium or many of the other elements, and she thought that hydrogen was the basic building block of all the elements, which is completely incorrect. The two on, truly the one, whom no person has seen except the Son. This sentence, applying both to the metaphysical and physical cosmos, and to the spiritual and material man, For how could the latter understand the Tuon, the one Father, if his Manos, the Son, does not become as one with the Father, and through this absorption receive enlightenment from the divine instructor, Guru, Atma Buddhi? If thou wouldst understand the secondary creation, so-called, O Lanu, thou should first study its relation to the primary. The first race had 3 elements, but no living fire. Why? Because we say 4 elements, my son, but ought to say 3, says Hermes Trismegistus. In the primary circle, creation, that which is marked reads root, as in the secondary likewise. Thus, in alchemy or Western Hermeticism, a variant on Eastern Esotericism, we find sulfur, flamma, spiritus, hydrargium, natura, aqua, sal, mater, sanguis. And these 3 are all quaternaries completed by their root, fire. The spirit, beyond manifested nature, is the fiery breath in its absolute unity. In the manifested universe, it is the central spiritual sun, the electric fire of all life. In our system, it is the visible sun, the spirit of nature, the terrestrial God. And in, on, and around the earth, the fiery spirit thereof, air, fluidic fire, water, liquid fire, earth, solid fire. All is fire, ignis, in its ultimate constitution, or I, the root of which is O, naught, in our conceptions, the all in nature and its mind. Pro mater is divine fire. It is the creator, the destroyer, the preserver, the Holy Spirit. The primitive names of the gods are all connected with fire, from Agni, the Aryan, to the Jewish god who is a consuming fire. In India, God is called in various dialects Ishur, Isur, Iswar, and Isvara. In Sanskrit, the Lord, from Isa. But this is primarily the name of Siva, the destroyer, and the 3 Vedic chief gods are Agnis, Ignis, Vayu, and Surya, fire, air, and the sun. 3 occult degrees of fire. In the Hebrew, Azah means to illuminate, and Asha is fire. In occultism, to kindle a fire is synonymous to evoking one of the 3 great fire powers, or to call on God. In Sanskrit, Oshk or Ashk is fire or heat, and the Egyptian word Osiris is compounded, as shown by Schelling, of the 2 primitives Aish and Asur, or a fire enchanter. Asar, in the old Etruscan, meant a god, being perhaps derived from Asura of the Vedas. Eswar and Eswara are analogous terms, as Dr. Kinley thought. In the Bhagavad Gita we read, Iswara resides in every mortal being and puts in motion, by his supernatural power, all things which mount on the wheel of time. All right, let's talk. This is the Holy Spirit to me, and this is all correct to me. Right? The Holy Spirit is quite literally, to me, every single atom in existence all at the same time, and all of the space between those atoms. You are completely surrounded right now by atoms. Most of them in their elemental form. You have free-floating oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, all kinds of things just floating around you. All of them have the capacity to move on their own slightly, and all of them contain potential for change. They can be bonded together. Those bonds can be broken apart. That bonding together and the breaking apart are both functions of the Spirit. To me, in my speculations, anything at all that is life, light, heat, motion, or a movement at all is a manifestation of the Holy Spirit. Without the Holy Spirit, everything is in complete stasis, Absolute zero. Nothing moves, nothing changes. Just like taking a picture in time, everything is perfectly still. When it is in reality, and we are not in that perfect picture of time, we are in the Logos, the Holy Spirit, plasma, all interchangeable words, phohat, all interchangeable for me. Every single instance of time, of passing of time, no matter how small the measurement is, micro nanoseconds, that is still a manifestation of the Spirit. Every single instance of life, light, heat, change, and movement, all of it, the Holy Spirit, which amounts to the wheel of time. It is quite literally the swastika. It is quite literally speaking things into motion. It is transferring your energy to something else, and it is taking energy from something else for yourself. All of it is the interaction of the Holy Spirit. And so for me, this is perfectly true. Right? Fire is the primary element. It is the manifestation of the Holy Spirit in a visible form. You are surrounded by the potential right now, but in the right circumstances, that potential can be changed to actuality. You can be struck by lightning, right? Sitting right where you are, standing right where you are, whatever you are doing right now. Every bit of the atmosphere around you can be ionized into that potential, or from that potential into actuality. And the visible sign of that change is the lightning flash. The sound you hear is the motion created from that. The lightning is the change. The fire is the change. That happens within you. Whenever you eat food and it changes into fuel, that is the Spirit. Whenever you decide to wiggle your fingers and your brain sends the signal to your fingers, that signal, the electrical impulses, that is the Spirit. So everything is intrinsic in the Spirit, from the Spirit, and will return to the Spirit. There is no separation at all from the Spirit except in the moments, which is the snapshots. Back to the text. It is the creator and destroyer, truly. The primitive fire was supposed to have an insatiable appetite for devouring. Maximus of Tyre relates that the ancient Persians threw into the fire combustible matter, crying, "Devour, O Lord." In the Irish language, Yasam or Asam means to create, and Asar was the name of an ancient Irish god, meaning to light a fire, kindling. The Christian Kabbalist and symbologist who disfigured Pymander, prominent among them the Bishop of Ayr, François de Tours, in the 16th century, divide the elements in this way. The four elements formed from divine substances and the spirits of the salts of nature, represented by St. Matthew, angel man, water, Jesus Christ, angel man, Michael. St. Mark, the lion, fire. St. Luke, the bull, earth. St. John, the eagle, air. Footnote. To those who would inquire, what is hydrogen to do with air or oxygenation? It is answered. Study first the ABC of occult alchemy. In their anxiety, however, to identify Pymander, the mouth of mystery, with St. John the Baptist prophetically, they thus identified also the seven Caballeri and the Assyrian bulls with the cherubs of Jews and apostles. Having, moreover, to draw a line of demarcation between the four and the three, the latter being the fallen angels, and furthermore, to avoid connecting these with the seven spirits of the face, the archangels, they unceremoniously threw out all they did not choose to recognize. Hence the perversion in the order of the elements, in order to make them dovetail with the order of the Gospels, and to identify the angel man with Christ. With the Chaldees, the Egyptians, from whom Moses adopted the cherubs in their animal form, and the Ophites, with all these, the angels, the planets, and the elements were symbolized mystically and alchemically by the lion, Michael, the bull, Uriel, the dragon, Raphael, the eagle, Gabriel, the bear, Tehote Sabaoth, the dog, Erateote, the mule, Uriel or Teharte Aroth. All of these have qualificative meaning. H. The quintessence. Did that start somewhere? No. Okay. The quintessence, Heflox, Flamma Virgo, virgin oil, Flamma Dorisma, Virgo, Lucis Alterna Mater. The first race of men were, then, simply the images, the astral doubles of their fathers, who were the pioneers or the most progressed entities from a preceding, though lower sphere, the shell of which is now our moon. But even this shell is all potential for having generated the earth, which is almost certainly the opposite. It is the phantom of the moon, which, attracted by magnetic affinity, sought to form its first inhabitants, the pre-human monsters. Vide Supra, stanza 2. And if that was confusing to you, fall back to the other lessons where we talked about how it is almost certain that the moon was knocked loose from the earth. The moon did not create the earth. To assure himself of this, the student has, again, to turn to the Chaldean fragments and read what Berosus says. Berosus obtained his information, he tells us, from Yah, the male-female deity of wisdom. While the gods were generated in its androgynous bosom, Svabhavat, mother space, its, the wisdom's, reflections became on earth the woman Amaruka, who is the Chaldean Tahavata, or the Greek Talasa, the deep or the sea, which esoterically or even exoterically is the moon. It was the moon, Amaruka, who presided over the monstrous creations of nondescript beings which were slain by the Dionys. Evolutionary law compelled the lunar fathers to pass in their monadic condition through all the forms of life and being on this globe. But at the end of the third round, they were already human in their divine nature, and were thus called upon to become the creators of the forms destined to fashion the tabernacles of the less progressed monads, whose turn it was to incarnate. These forms are called sons of yoga because yoga, union with Brahma exoterically, is the supreme condition of the passive, infinite deity, since it contains all the divine energies and is the essence of Brahma, who is said, as Brahma, to create everything through yoga power. Brahma, Vishnu, and Siva are the most powerful energies of God. Brahma, the neuter, says a Puranic text. Yoga here is the same as dhyana, which word is again synonymous with yoga in the Tibetan text, where the sons of yoga are called sons of dhyana, or of the abstract meditation through which the dhyani Buddhis collect their celestial sons, the dhyani bodhisattvas. All the creatures in the world have each a superior above. This superior, whose inner pleasure is to emanate into them, cannot impart a flux until they have adored, in example, meditated as during yoga. 19. The second race was the product of by budding and expansion, the asexual form from the sexless shadow. Thus was Olanu, the second race, produced. A. What will be most contested by scientific authorities is this asexual race. The second, the fathers of the sweat-born, so-called, and perhaps still more the third race, the egg-born androgynes. These two modes of procreation are the most difficult to comprehend, especially for the Western mind. It is evident that no explanation can be attempted for those who are not students of occult metaphysics. European language has no words to express things which nature repeats no more at this stage of evolution. Things which, therefore, can have no meaning for the materialist. But there are analogies. It is not denied that in the beginning of physical evolution there must have been processes in nature, spontaneous generation, for instance, now extinct, which are repeated in other forms. Thus, we are told that microscopic research shows no permanence of any particular mode of reproducing life. 4. It shows that the same organism may run through various metamorphoses in the course of its life cycle, during some of which it may be sexual and in others asexual. In example, it may reproduce itself alternately by the cooperation of two beings of opposite sex, and also by fissure or budding from one being only, which is of no sex. Now, the only way that this is a possibility is through cloning, right? If you have a fruit tree and you want another fruit tree of the same kind, you can go out and cut a branch, wrap it in some moist soil, and in a couple of weeks it will grow roots. It is a genetic exact of the original. It is exactly the same tree. Just separated by distance. There is no real difference between the two. And that is how you can reproduce without sex. Humans, however, do not have that capacity. You don't have the ability to just spit on the ground and then your spit grow up into a human. You don't have the ability to cut out a rib and then it just spontaneously grow into a woman. These are not things that are part of our life in any way, shape, or form. There are some asexual animals which produce both male and female reproducible, or not animals. I don't know if there's any animals that do that or not. Not positive, right? There are some hermaphroditic that can be determined by their environment. They have the capacity to change from male to female in certain instances. That is a real thing. But again, that is not a human thing. There are plants that reproduce with themselves. They create both the male and the female genitalia and commingle. Tomatoes do that. There are other plants as well, right? And so this is not an entirely foreign concept, but it is not a human thing. It is not something that humans have gone through, are going through, or will go through, according to any logic whatsoever. And that is definitely including the ridiculousness that we have today of people thinking that they're born in the wrong body. You are not born in the wrong body. You have never been wrong in the body. Your thinking that you are wrong is a problem here, not with the physicality. You have the issue. Your body doesn't. That is a problem for you to figure out. It does not include cutting genitalia off. Your particular lessons are a little bit different from the rest of ours, but the lesson is always to accept yourself as you are. That doesn't mean that there's no room for change, right? That is to say that you are created with the potential for perfect. Every single one of us. None of us will ever achieve that, but we all have the potential for it. You have the potential to overcome any particular problem, any of them, through the way that you were already created. That when I say that you are perfect, whole, and complete, that is what I mean. You are perfectly created. There is nothing wrong with your genitalia. You are whole in that you have everything that you need to achieve what you need to. And you have the capacity to understand right from wrong. You have the ability to change your actions due to right or wrong. And perfect, whole, and complete. That means that you don't have to have anything external in order to change yourself. You are perfectly formed, whole in yourself, and complete in the tools that you need to enact the change that you are here for. There is no part of that that includes cutting off your genitalia or reforming it. Back to the text. Budding is the very word used in the stanza. How could these cacayas reproduce themselves otherwise? They didn't exist. Right? It is a supposition that they existed, right? That these cacayas, these angels, that is a supposition. Now, I fully believe that I have been visited by one of these angels. I still hold it in the realm of speculation. Like, it is a literal experience that I have had, but I cannot give that to anyone. I cannot prove that to anyone, and so it will remain speculation. The best answer for this is that they weren't there. That this was somebody trying to explain something, but not necessarily that they were correct, that they had good information, right? That is not a supposition that is necessarily part of this. That this is truth is something that you can believe, but it is something that we have zero evidence for. Back to the text. Vis-a-vis procreate the second race, since they were ethereal, asexual, and even devoid as yet of the vehicle of desire, or kamarupa, which only evolved in the third race. They evolved the second race unconsciously, as do some plants. Or perhaps, as the amoeba, only on a more ethereal, impressive, and a larger scale. If indeed the cell theory applies equally to botany and zoology, and it does, and extends to morphology as well as to physiology of organisms, and if the microscopic cells are looked upon by the physical senses as independent living beings, just as occultism regards the fiery lives. Footnote. See Book 1, Part 1, stanzas 7. Just as occultism regards the fiery lives, there is no difficulty in the conception of the primitive process of procreation. That is not necessarily true. Once again, right? She did not have an understanding. They were just beginning to get an understanding of cell technology. This is well before DNA, and those things are much better explained by our current understanding of science. Consider the first stages of the development of a germ cell. Its nucleus grows, changes, and forms a double cone or spindle. Hey, look, they had the double helix. That is interesting within the cell. That is interesting. I was not aware of this, right? My understanding was that the double helix was a relatively modern thing. The fact that this is contained in here is definitely new information. Now, obviously, they don't have the understanding of it, right? But there was at least the surface approach to understanding. This spindle approaches the surface of the cell, and one half of it is extruded in the form of what are called the polar cells. These polar cells now die, and the embryo develops from the growth and segmentation of the remaining part of the nucleus, which is nourished by the substance of the cell. Then why could not beings have lived thus and been created in this way at the very beginning of human and mammalian evolution? Now, I'm assuming that this germ cell is stem cells, right? Our understanding of the primordial proteins which formulate life, stem cells. We use those in medical therapies, right? We go and we get those and we use those to help people to recover from things for various reasons. It grows and can adapt into others, right? So a stem cell can be either bone or muscle, or it can be the lining of your nerves. It can, whatever it is required to be, it becomes. This forming of a double cone or spindle, right? I'm assuming that that is not going to be DNA, right? That must be the development creating the form of the muscles, right? The way the muscular tissue will form in a spiral. That's got to be what it's talking about. This can't be talking about actual DNA from the context. But, I mean, that is how DNA works, right? You have the double helix, you get one strand of DNA from your mother and one strand of your DNA from your father, and they commingle, give a flash of light, and start developing into people. You know, that is the creation of the stem cells. That is literally source material for what I believe she is talking about here. And so while we are all formed from that, that does not necessarily mean that there was some spontaneous mutation of osmosis by which there was a splitting of a being into two beings. Right? That does not necessarily have to follow. This may, perhaps, serve as an analogy to give some idea of the process by which the second race was formed from the first. The astral form clothing the monad was surrounded, as it still is, by its egg-shaped sphere of aura, which here corresponds to the substance of the germ cell or ovum. The astral form itself is the nucleus now, as then, instinct with the principle of life. You are, indeed, encapsulated by energy. That is a true thing. We can take photographs of it. We can see it. It is a thing. That is magnetism, right? Electromagnetism holds you in place. I firmly and fully believe that in my speculations. We have talked many times about them in the Infinite Integrations playlist, but you have 7 internal chakras. They are all electromagnetic centers of emanation. They hold together the various components that are you. That is my belief. That is where I speculate. And it is played into by this. But the aura is the 8th chakra, which you have access to. If you align your inner 7 and you are doing the energetic works, then you can access this aura and change it. You can make it different shapes. You can extend it and withdraw it. You can change the coloration. You can do things to this. This is a thing which I believe is possible. And so I do believe that this does indeed form you, right? Now, when those two DNA interact and create, they form the base right off the top. The first thing that you get is your butthole. Everything else grows out of it, right? There's a full link from your mouth to your butthole all the way. And these other chakras develop along the way, but that first one, that electromagnetic emanation, starts right away. The base from which all is built starts immediately. Then you get the crown, and then it stretches, and you get the other parts developed as you go along. They each individually create the you that is you. The one surrounding actually is fed off of these. So whether it may even be possible that the primary chakra that is created is the divine one, and then the base immediately thereafter, so that you can receive the information and start growing. So either way, that I do at least in part align with that. When the season of reproduction arrives, the subastral extrudes a miniature of itself from the egg of surrounding aura. This germ grows and feeds on the aura till it becomes fully developed, when it gradually separates from its parent, carrying with it its own sphere of aura, just as we see two living cells reproducing their like by growth and subsequent division into two. The analogy of the polar cells would seem to hold good, since their death would now correspond to the change introduced by the separation of the sexes. When gestation in utero, in example, within the cell, became the rule. The early second root race were the fathers of the sweat-born. The later second root race were sweat-born themselves. This passage from the commentary refers to the work of evolution from the beginning of a race to its close. The sons of Yoga, or the primitive astral race, had 7 stages of evolution racially, or collectively, as every individual being in it had and has now. It is not Shakespeare only who divided the ages of man into a series of 7, but nature herself. Thus, the first subraces of the second race were born at first by the process described on the law of analogy, while the last began gradually pari passu with the evolution of the human body to be formed otherwise. The process of reproduction has 7 stages also in each race, each covering eons of time. What physiologist or biologist could tell whether the present mode of generation, with all its phases of gestation, is older than 500,000 or at most 1,000,000 of years, since their cycle of observation began hardly half a century ago? Okay, so here we have another one of those problems, right? We know beyond the shadow of a doubt that at least 400,000 years ago, physical reproduction in a human was the same. We don't have any skeletal remains beyond that point, so of course we cannot prove it. But there is no reason to doubt whatsoever that our current method of reproduction is different than the reproduction that they had 1,000,000 years ago if the human species existed upon the planet. There has been no change in what is required to create human life at all on this planet in the entirety of the time that we have been recording the way that people make babies. There has been no change whatsoever in sexual reproduction at all in the entirety of the human race. There has been no point by which different orifices were effective in producing new life. I mean, you can violate them, you can do things to them, but you're not going to create life from them. Now, you can argue cloning, but that's not sexual reproduction. I mean, this is intimating cloning better than anything. That would require scientific advances well beyond what is attributed to any by pretty much any of the people who attribute greater understanding to the antiquities, right? Like, I believe in Atlantis. I believe that they were an advanced civilization, but that does not mean that they had televisions and flying vehicles and lasers and things of that nature. It doesn't mean that. It means that they had a better understanding of how to navigate the oceans. They had seafaring capacities. They had agriculture before everybody else. They had the ability to preserve and store food, understandings of things that people didn't have and lost through the course of time. That is what I believe. That is my speculations. At no point in that is there the capacity to clone a human being. Doesn't mean that it could not have existed. We just simply don't have any reason to believe that it did. Even in the only primary account that we have of a prehistoric civilization, which comes from Plato, Timaeus, we have done that in Ancient Lore playlist. In that record, they were having warships. They were fighting with swords. They had armor. They had a greater understanding than the surrounding peoples, and so they were a more advanced civilization than all of the surrounding peoples, as far as we know. I mean, that is the only record that we have, is Timaeus. Everything else, as far as I am aware, and if I am wrong, drop it in the comments, everything else is built off of Timaeus. Every other speculative, this could have been Atlantis, was built off of Plato's Atlantis. And so I don't understand like some of the things that are attributed to Atlantis. Like, where did you even get that from? Where do you get that they had some flying ship? Where do you get that they had laser beams? Where do you get that they had the ability to clone human beings? Now, you can make arguments, right? As it was in the days of Noah. That's an argument that can be made for cloning, because they say in the Bible that there was genetic manipulations, that there was a commingling of species. That is stated. That is genetic manipulation. If that is true, as far as I am aware, that is the only instance that it is recorded. And so then, in that one particular instance, then you can say that maybe there was cloning. I do not have any other justification for any type of belief that even resembles that. So, this argument that, well, we only started observing 50 years ago, do you think? Like some people do. They knew about sexual reproduction in antiquity. This is an undisputable fact. Now, somehow, during the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, Europe lost that understanding, according to the records, but I'm not even really sure that that is a real thing, right? I believe that there was a grand conspiracy to hold knowledge back from people. That is real. Signified by the clubs, right? The Rosicrucians, even if they were altruistic, were withholding knowledge from the general people. They had an understanding of sexual reproduction, even if everybody around them did not. The Bible has held back a lot of progress through the years, not the least of which was understanding of sexual reproduction. All right. Let me get back to the text. I'm already dragging on, so. Primeval human hermaphrodites are a fact in nature well known to the ancients, but form one of Darwin's greatest perplexities. No, there is certainly no impossibility, but on the contrary, a great probability that hermaphroditism existed in the evolution of the early races. No, while on the grounds of analogy, and on that of the existence of one universal law in physical evolution, acting indifferently in the construction of plant, animal, and man, it must be so. The mistaken theories of monogenesis and the descent of man from the mammals, instead of the reverse, are fatal to the completeness of evolution as taught in modern schools on Darwinian lines, and they will have to be abandoned in view of the insuperable difficulties which they encounter. All right. Now, I have some very unconventional beliefs. One of them is that microevolution works and macroevolution doesn't, right? I don't believe that we were descended from apes, at least in the way that is explained by Darwin. There are only two options, in my estimation, that would lead to apes becoming men. One is genetic manipulation by a species other than ourselves. If there were indeed the Anunnaki, or the ones who were experimenting in the Bible with the mingling of the genetic materials, that is one explanation of how man could have come to be. The mutation from one species into another. The only other explanation that makes any sense to me whatsoever is a electromagnetic event on a cosmic scale. Now, that doesn't mean that it affected the entirety of the cosmos. It means that it came from the cosmos to us. So, from outside of the planet, at least, possibly even outside of the solar system. We were visited by a passing asteroid that was electromagnetically radioactive. The spontaneous genetic mutation from a radioactive event would account for the losing of the hair, right? The development of speech, the ability to think and plan. These can be spontaneous mutations, but in order for them to be effective spontaneous mutations, they have to take place quickly. It can't be this one animal mutated and then somehow this one hairless ape is selected by all of these regular normal apes, females, to breed with and thereby pass on the missing hair gene. That doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form, right? These females are not going to naturally select something that is completely aberrant to their species. If you are a gorilla and every gorilla around you is covered in hair, the one gorilla without hair is not going to be selected. They are not going to be the one. It will not be them. And so, in order for that one gorilla to be selected, there has to be more gorillas with the same problem. It is exceedingly difficult to believe that outside of some spontaneous event that caused the mutation of the gene, that it just happened. That somehow, randomly, all at the same time, all of these females give birth to hairless babies. That would be the requirement for this to work, right? They all had to happen at the same time because they are not going to select the animal that is least likely to live. Back to the text. Occult tradition, if the terms science and knowledge are denied in this particular to antiquity, can alone reconcile the inconsistencies and fill the gap. If thou wilt know the invisible, open thine eyes wide on the visible, says a Talmudic axiom. In The Descent of Man, footnote, 2nd edition, page 161, occurs the following passage, which shows how near Darwin came to the acceptance of this ancient teaching. It has been known that in the vertebrate kingdom one sex bears rudiments of various accessory parts appertaining to the reproductive system, which properly belong to the opposite sex. Some remote progenitor of the whole vertebrate kingdom appears to have been hermaphroditic or androgynous. Footnote 2, and why not all the progenitive first races, human as well as animal, and why one remote progenitor? One sex bears rudiments of various accessory parts appertaining to the reproductive system. So I am assuming by this that we are talking about nipples on men, right? Why? What is the reason? Who knows? I don't. Maybe it is this. Maybe so. But we have the problem of every single mammalian has the same issue, right? There are nipples on male dogs. There are nipples on male lions. There are nipples on all of the male reptilians. That doesn't mean that they came from hermaphrodite, right? There are vestigial organs. That is true. Some people have tails. I bet you didn't know that. That is a true thing. That is real. But, again, that is a genetic manipulation. And for the most part, those who have those aberrations have a hard time passing them on, right? There is no reason to believe that because men have nipples that once upon a time everybody had to have been hermaphroditic. If we find a group of mass burial, which is definitely a possibility, if we find a mass burial of a village of hermaphrodites from antiquity, fine. We can talk about this then. Until such a time as we find more than a less than 1% hermaphroditic rate in the human species, then we got a problem. Right? And that is a real thing, right? It's like 0.03% of human beings are born hermaphrodite, which means that they have both genitalia. We won't get into the other part. I was going to get a little bit graphic with y'all and start describing sexual organs because there are a lot of issues with the differentiation, but we're not going to get into that. If that is something you're interested in, we might have to do that on Rumble. Let me know down below. But here we encounter a singular difficulty. In the mammalian class, the males possess rudiments of a uterus with the adjacent passages in the vesiculae prostaticae. Really? Somebody please remind me to look this up because as far as I am aware, that is not real. They also bear rudiments of mammae, and some male marsupials have traces of a marsupial sac. Other analogous facts could be added. Are we then to suppose that some extremely ancient mammal continued androgynous after it had acquired the chief distinctions of its class, and therefore after it had diverged from the lower classes of the vertebrate kingdom? This seems very improbable. True. Footnote, obviously so on the lines of evolutionism, which traces the mammalia to some amphibian ancestor. This seems very improbable, for we have to look to fishes, the lowest of all the classes, to find any still existent androgynous forms. Mr. Darwin is evidently strongly disinclined to adopt the hypothesis which the facts so forcibly suggest, vis-a-vis that of a primeval and androgynous stem from which the mammalia sprang. His explanation runs, the fact that various accessory organs proper to each sex are found in rudimentary conditions in the opposite sex may be explained by such organs have been gradually acquired by the one sex and then transmitted in a more or less imperfect condition to the other. He instances the case of spurs, plumes, and brilliant colors acquired for battle and for ornament by male birds, and only partially inherited by their female descendants. In the problem to be dealt with, however, the need of a more satisfactory explanation is evident, the facts being of so much more prominent and important a character than the mere superficial details with which they were compared by Darwin. Why not candidly admit the argument in favor of the hermaphroditism which characterizes the old fauna? Occultism produces a solution which embraces the facts in a most comprehensive and simple manner. These relics of a prior androgyne stock must be placed in the same category as the pineal gland and other organs as mysterious, which afford us silent testimony as to the reality of functions which have long since become atrophied in the course of animal and human progress, but which once played a signal part in the general economy of primeval life. The pineal gland is a thing in your brain. It is something that you can access if you take the proper steps as outlined in the Infinite Integrations playlist, and you can use that to produce DMT within your brain because that is the function that it serves. It produces dimethyltryptamine when you are born and when you die all by itself, but you can make that happen. The occult doctrine, anyhow, can be advantageously compared with that of the most liberal men of science, who have theorized upon the origin of the first man. Long before Darwin, Naudin, who gave the name of blastema to that which the Darwinists call protoplasm, put forth a theory, half occult and half scientifico-materialistic. He made Adam, the asexual, spring suddenly from the clay, as it is called in the Bible, the blastema of science. It is from this larval form of mankind that the evolutive force effected the completion of species. For the accomplishment of this great phenomenon, Adam had to pass through a phase of immobility and unconsciousness very analogous to the nymphal state of animals undergoing metamorphosis, explains Naudin. For the eminent botanist, Adam was not one man, however, but mankind, which remained concealed within a temporary organism, distinct from all others and never contracting an alliance with any of these. He shows the differentiation of sexes accomplished by a process of germination similar to that of Medusae and Ascidians. Mankind, thus constituted physiologically, would retain a sufficient evolutive force for the rapid production of the various great human races. De Quatrefages criticizes this position in the human species. It is unscientific, he says, or properly speaking, Naden's ideas do not form a scientific theory, inasmuch as primordial blastema is connected in his theory with the first cause, which is credited with having made potentially in the blastema all past, present, and future beings, and thus of having in reality created these beings en masse. Moreover, Naudin does not even consider the secondary causes or their action in this evolution of the organic world. Science, which is only occupied with secondary causes, has thus nothing to say on the theory of Naudin. People can come up with all kinds of speculation. That does not mean it is true. Nor will it have any more to say to the occult teachings, which are to some extent approached by Naudin. But if we see in his primordial blastema the diancohonic essence, the cacaya, or double of the pitrus, which contains within itself the potentiality of all forms, we are quite in accord. But there are two real and vital differences between our teachings. M. Naudin declares that evolution has progressed by sudden leaps and bounds, instead of extending slowly over millions of years, and his primordial blastema is endowed only with blind instincts, a kind of unconscious first cause in the manifested cosmos, which is an absurdity. That is so much more absurd than that there was some spiritual body which through osmosis gave birth to a materialistic body. That is so much more absurd than that. It makes so much less sense than that. Neither one of them make any sense. Whereas it is our dian-cohonic essence, the causality of the primal cause, which creates physical man, which is the living, active, and potential matter, pregnant per se, with that animal consciousness of a superior kind, such as is found in the ant and the beaver, which produces the long series of physiological differentiations. Apart from this, his ancient and general process of creation from proto-organisms is as occult as any theory of Paracelsus or Kuhn-Roth could be. Moreover, the Kabbalistic works are full of the proof of this. The Zohar, for instance, says that every type in the visible has its prototype in the invisible universe. All that which is in the lower, our world, is found in the upper. The lower and the upper act and react upon each other. Just because it's written does not mean it's true. 20. Their fathers were the self-born, the Kakaya, from the brilliant bodies of the lords, the fathers, the sons of twilight. A. The shadows, or Kakayas, are called the sons of the self-born, as the latter name is applied to all the gods and beings born through the will, whether of deity or adept. The homunculi of Paracelsus would, perhaps, be also given this name, though the latter process is on a far more material plane. The name, Sons of Twilight, shows that the self-born progenitors of our doctrine are identical with the Pitris of the Brahmanical system. As the title is a reference to their mode of birth, these Pitris, being stated to have issued from Brahma's body of twilight, see the Puranas. 21. When the race became old, the old waters mixed with the fresher waters. A. When the drops became turbid, they vanished and disappeared in the new stream, in the hot stream of life. The outer of the first became the inner of the second. The old wing became the shadow and the shadow of the wing. A. The old primitive race merged in the second race and became one with it. That does not necessarily mean that they are spiritual beings. B. This is the mysterious process of transformation and evolution of mankind. The material of the first forms, shadowy, ethereal, and negative, was drawn or absorbed into and thus became the complement of the forms of the second race. The commentary explains this by saying that, as the first race was simply composed of the astral shadows of the creative progenitors, having, of course, neither astral nor physical bodies of their own, this race never died. Its men melted gradually away, becoming absorbed into the bodies of their own sweat-born progeny, more solid than their own. The old form vanished and was absorbed by, disappeared in, the new form, more human and physical. There was no death in those days of a period more blissful than the Golden Age. But the first, or parent material, was used for the formation of the new being, to form the body and even the inner or lower principles, or bodies of the progeny. C. When the shadow retires, an example, when the astral body becomes covered with more solid flesh, man develops a physical body. The wing, or the ethereal form that produces its shadow and image, became the shadow of the astral body and its progeny. The expression is queer, but original. As there may be no occasion to refer to this mystery later, it is as well to point out at once the dual meaning contained in the Greek myths bearing upon this particular phase of evolution. It is found in the several variants of the allegory of Leda and her two sons, Castor and Pollux, which variants have each a special meaning. Thus, in Book 11 of the Odyssey, Leda is spoken of as the spouse of Tyndarus, who gave birth by her husband to two sons of valiant heart, Castor and Pollux. Jupiter endows them with a marvelous gift and privilege. They are semi-immortal. They live and die, each in turn, and every alternate day. Etrere meroi, footnote, Odyssey. We are in the middle of the Iliad. We will be doing the Odyssey when we're done with it, but we're not there yet. As the Tyndaridae, the twin brothers, are an astronomical symbol and stand for day and night. Their two wives, Phoebe and Helena, the daughters of Apollo or the sun, personifying the dawn and the twilight. Footnote 2. Chants séparés. All of these appear to be footnotes or references, so I don't know that we're going to do all of them. Again, in the allegory where Zeus is shown as the father of the two heroes, born from the egg to which Leda gives birth, the myth is entirely theogonical. It relates to that group of cosmic allegories in which the world is described as born from an egg. For Leda assumes it in the shape of a white swan when uniting herself to the divine swan. Leda is the mythical bird, then, to which, in the traditions of various peoples of the Aryan race, are attributed various ornithological forms of birds which all lay golden eggs. In the Kalevala, the epic poem of Finland, the beauteous daughter of Ether, the water mother, creates the world in conjunction with a duck, another form of the swan or goose, Kalahansa, who lays 6 golden eggs, and the 7th, an egg of iron, in her lap. But the variant of the Leda allegory, which has a direct reference to the mystic man, is found in Pindar only, with a slighter reference to it in the Homeric hymns. Now this one, not even there yet. Okay, Castor and Pollux are in it no longer the Dioscuri of Apollodorus, but become this highly significant symbol of the dual man, the mortal and the immortal. Not only this, as will now be seen, they are also the symbol of the third race and its transformation from the animal man into a god man with only an animal body. Pindar shows Leda uniting herself in the same night to her husband and also to the father of the gods, Zeus. Thus, Castor is the son of the mortal, Pollux the progeny of the immortal. In the allegory made up for the occasion, it is said that in a riot of vengeance against the Ephyrides, Pollux kills Lynceus. Of all mortals, he whose sight is the most penetrating, but Castor is wounded by Idas, he who sees and knows. Zeus puts an end to the fight by hurling his thunderbolt and killing the last 2 combatants. Pollux finds his brother dying. Castor's tomb was shown in Sparta in days of old, says Pausanias. And Plutarch says that he was called at Argos the demi-mortal or demi-hero. Pollux finds his brother dying. In his despair he calls upon Zeus to slay him also. "Thou canst not die together," answers the master of the gods. "Thou art of a divine race." But he gives him the choice. Pollux will either remain immortal, living eternally in Olympus, or, if he would share his brother's fate in all things, he must pass half his existence underground, and the other half in the golden heavenly abodes. This semi-immortality, which is also to be shared by Castor, is accepted by Pollux. Footnote 1. Okay. And thus, the twin brothers live alternately, one during the day and the other during the night. We're not going to check out that footnote either. It's just references to the source. Is this a poetical fiction only? An allegory? One of those solar myths interpretations, higher than which no modern Orientalist seems to be able to soar? Indeed, it is much more. Here we have an allusion to the egg-born third race, the first half of which is mortal, in example, unconscious in its personality, and having nothing within itself to survive. Footnote 3. The monad is impersonal and a god per se, albeit unconscious on this plane. For divorce from its third, often called fifth, principle, manas, which is the horizontal line, or the first manifested triangle or trinity, it can have no consciousness or perception of things on this earthly plane. The highest sees through the eye of the lowest in the manifested world. Purusha, spirit, remains blind without the help of prakrit, matter, in the material spheres, and so does Atma Buddhi without manas. And having nothing within itself to survive, and the latter half of which becomes immortal in its individuality by reason of its fifth principle being called to life by the informing gods, and thus connecting the monad with this earth. This is Pollux, while Castor represents the personal, mortal man, an animal of not even a superior kind, when unlinked from the divine individuality. Twins, truly, yet divorced by death forever, unless Pollux, moved by the voice of twinship, bestows on his less favored mortal brother a share of his own divine nature, thus associating him with his own immortality. Such is the occult meaning of the metaphysical aspect of this allegory. The widely spread modern interpretation of it, so celebrated in antiquity, Plutarch tells us, footnote 4, morals, as symbolical of brotherly devotion, namely, that it was an image borrowed from the spectacle of nature. It is weak and inadequate to explain the secret meaning. Besides the fact that the moon, with the Greeks, was feminine in exoteric mythology, and could therefore hardly be regarded as Castor, and at the same time be identified with Diana, ancient symbologists who held the sun, the king of all the sidereal orbs, as the visible image of the highest deity, would not have personified it by Pollux, a demigod only. Footnote 5. This strange idea and interpretation are accepted by Duchamp in his Mythologie de la Grèce antique. Castor and Pollux, he says, are nothing but the sun and... well, there it is. And in the Book of Enoch, we have Adam. How is this? What? Okay, something is not right here, right? This footnote continues. It says sun and, but then it comes down here, footnote continued, and it is blank. In the Book of Enoch, we have Adam, which is another footnote, so something is definitely not correct here. I think we just lost the rest of that reference. That's what happened. So, all right. If, from Greek mythology, we pass to the Mosaic allegories and symbolism, we shall find a still more striking corroboration of the same tenet under another form. Unable to trace in Genesis the egg-born, we shall still find there unmistakably the androgenes, and the first three races of the secret doctrine, hidden under the most ingenious symbology in the first 4 chapters of Genesis. The divine hermaphrodite. An impenetrable veil of secrecy was thrown over the occult and religious mysteries taught. After the submersion of the last remnant of the Atlantean race, some 12,000 years ago, lest they should be shared by the unworthy and so desecrated. Of these sciences, several have now become exoteric, such as astronomy, for instance, in its purely mathematical and physical aspect. Hence, their dogmas and tenets being all symbolized and left to the sole guardianship of parable and allegory, have been forgotten, and their meaning has become perverted. Nevertheless, one finds the hermaphrodite in the scriptures and traditions of almost every nation. And why such unanimous agreement if the statement is only a fiction? Because, according to you, that is all using the same source material. It is this secrecy which led the 5th race to the establishment, or rather, the re-establishment of the religious mysteries, in which ancient truths might be taught to the coming generations under the veil of allegory and symbolism. Behold, the imperishable witness to the evolution of the human races from the divine, and especially from the androgynous race, the Egyptian Sphinx, that riddle of the ages. Divine wisdom incarnating on earth and forced to taste of the bitter fruit of personal experience of pain and suffering, generated under the shade of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, a secret first known only to the Elohim, the self-initiated, higher gods, on earth only. Footnote 1. See the Book of Enoch. We have read the Book of Enoch. In the Book of Enoch, we have Adam. Footnote. Adam Kadmon is, like Brahma and Mars, the symbol of the generative and creative power, typifying water and earth, an alchemical secret. It takes earth and water to create a human soul, says Moses. Mars is the Hindu Mangala, the planet Mars, identical with Kartikeya, the war god, born of Garmaya, Siva's sweat, and of the earth. He is Lokita, the red, like Brahma, also in Adam. The Hindu Mars is, like Adam, born from no woman and mother. With the Egyptians, Mars was the primeval generative principle, and so are Brahma in esoteric teaching, and Adam in the Kabbalah. In the Book of Enoch, we have Adam, the first divine androgyne, Moon, conceived as twins, the Sun, the immortal and powerful being that disappears every evening from the horizon and descends under the earth, as though he would make room for the fraternal orb which comes to life with night, and sometimes day, is Pollux, who sacrifices himself for Castor. Castor, who, inferior to his brother, owes to him his immortality. For the moon, says Theophrastus, is only another, but feebler, sun. What happened? On earth only. Separating into man and woman and becoming Yah-Hivah in one form or race, and Cain and Abel. Footnote. Abel is Cable, meaning pains of birth, conception. You're going to have a hard sell that Cain and Abel are male and female. In its other form or race, the double-sexed Jehovah, which has been explained many times. See Isis Unveiled? We have done that. See the beginning of this book where we have done that, where Jehovah is shown to be Adam and Eve blended, and Hava, or Abel, the feminine serpent. An echo of its Aryan prototype, Brahmavak, after which come the third and fourth root races of mankind. Footnote 3. See Isis Unveiled, the union of the two create a third race. That is to say, races of men and women, or individuals of opposite sexes, no longer sexless semi-spirits and androgynes, as were the two races which precede them. This fact is hinted at in every anthropogeny. It is found in fable and allegory, in myth and revealed scriptures, in legend and tradition, because of all the great mysteries inherited by initiates from hoary antiquity, this is one of the greatest. It accounts for the bisexual element found in every creative deity, in Brahma Varashvak, as in Adam, Jehovah, Eve, also in Cain, Jehovah, Abel. For the book of the generations of Adam does not even mention Cain and Abel, but say only, male and female he created them and called their name Adam. That is two different references. Right? Again, I have not read the Zohar, I have not read the Kabbalah, and maybe this is from the Kabbalah. But according to Genesis, male and female, he created Adam and Eve, not Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel were the progeny after the expulsion from Eden. And so this is not even using the same references for each other. Then it proceeds to say, and Adam begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. That was after Cain killed Abel. After which he begets other sons and daughters, thus proving that Cain and Abel are his own allegorical permutations. That is not proof. That isn't a speculation. That is not proof. Adam stands for the primitive human race, especially in its cosmos-sidereal sense. Not so, however, in its theoanthropological meaning. The compound name of Jehovah, or Yahovah, meaning male life and female life, first androgynous, then separated into sexes, is used in this sense in Genesis from chapter 5 onwards. As the author of The Source of Measures says, the two words of which Jehovah is composed make up the original idea of male-female as the birth originators. For the Hebrew letter Yod was the membrum virile, and Hova was Eve, the mother of all living, or the procreatrix, earth and nature. The author believes, therefore, that it is seen that the perfect one, the perfect female circle, or yoni, 20612, numerically, as the originator of measures, takes also the form of the birth origin, hermaphrodite 1, hence the phallic form and use. Precisely. Only the phallic form and use came long ages later, and the first and original meaning of Enos, the son of Seth, was the first race born in the present usual way from man and woman. For Seth is no man, but a race. Before him humanity was hermaphrodite. No, whatever. While Seth is the first result, physiologically, after the fall, he is also the first man. No, you are misrepresenting the source material. Maybe the Zohar is different, but you are quoting the Bible, right? You are quoting Genesis. We have done a study on that, and there are many things to doubt about Genesis. But if you are going to quote it, it should be in context, and this is not. Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden and then created Cain and Abel. When Abel died by the hand of Cain, then they created Seth. Cain still lived and had progeny according to Genesis. So it was not just Seth creating the entirety of the human race. On top of that, Seth went out and found a wife. It wasn't his sister. He went and found a wife. And so, again, not necessarily the progenitor of the entirety of the human race. Back to the text. To screen the real mystery name of Ein Sof, the boundless and endless no thing, the Kabbalists have brought forward the compound attribute appellation of one of the personal creative Elohim, whose name was Yak and Jab. The letters I, or J, or Y, being interchangeable, or Yahovah, i.e., male and female. And it's not necessarily, right, there was not the J sound, right? That is one of the things that we talked about quite often as we went through the Bible study, was that the J sound was a much later addition to the human vernacular. And so when we see Jehovah, it is Jehovah. When we see Yahshua, it is Yahshua. So all of the J's are pronounced with a Y. Now the I and the Y are somewhat interchangeable, but the J is a later appellation added in. Yahovah, in example male or female, is footnote 1. Yod in the Kabbalah has for its symbol the hand, the forefinger, and the lingam, while numerically it is the perfect 1, but it is also the number 10, male and female, when divided. Another reason not to pay any attention to gematria whatsoever. Yah, Eve, and hermaphrodite, or the first form of humanity, the original Adam of earth, not even Adam Cadmon, whose mind-born son is the earthly Jehovah mystically. And knowing this, the crafty Rabbin Kabbalist has made of it a name so secret that he could not divulge it later on without exposing the whole scheme, and thus he was obliged to make it sacred. How close is the identity between Braha Prajapati and Jehovah Sephiroth, between Brahma Varash and Jehovah Adam? The Bible and the Puranas compared can alone show. Analyzed and read in the same light, they afford cogent evidence that they are two copies of the same original, made at two periods far distant from each other. Compare once more in relation to this subject Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 and 26, and Manu 1, and they will both yield their meaning. In Manu, Brahma, who is also both man and God, divides his body into male and female, stands in his esoteric meaning, as does Jehovah or Adam in the Bible, for the symbolical personification of creative and generative power, both divine and human. It is important to note that the God dividing himself into male and female is not androgynous. The Zohar affords still more convincing proof of identity. While some rabbins repeat word for word certain original Puranic expressions, e.g., the creation of the world is generally considered in the Brahmanical books to be the Lila, delight or sport, the amusement of the Supreme Creator. Vishnu, being thus discrete and indiscrete substance, spirit, and time, sports like a playful boy and frolics. Vishnu Purana, Book 1. Now, compare this with what is said in the book Nobilith Hukmah. The Kabbalists say that the entering into existence of the worlds happens through delight, in that Ein Sof rejoiced in itself and flashed and beamed from itself to itself, which are all called delight, etc., quoted in Meyer's Kabbalah. Thus, it is not a curious idea of the Kabbalists, as the author just quoted remarks, but a purely Puranic Aryan idea. Only, why make of Ein Sof a creator? The divine hermaphrodite is then Brahma Vak Virash, and that of the Semites, or rather of the Jews, is Jehovah Cain Abel. Only the heathen were and are more sincere and frank than were the later Israelites and rabbis, who undeniably knew the real meaning of their exoteric deity. The Jews regard the name given to them, the Yadodi, as an insult, yet they have, or would have, if they only wished it, as undeniable a right to call themselves the ancient Yahudi, Yahovians, as the Brahmins have to call themselves Brahmins, after their national deity. 4. Yahuwah is a generic name of that group or hierarchy of creative planetary angels, under whose star their nation has evolved. He is one of the planetary Elohim of the region group of Saturn. Verse 26 of Genesis chapter 4, when read correctly, would alone give them such a right, for it calls the new race of men sprung from Seth and Enos, Jehovah, something quite different from the translation adopted in the Bible. To him also was born a son, Enos, who began men to call themselves Yah or Jehovah, with men and women the lords of creation. One has to but read the above-mentioned verse in the original Hebrew text and by the light of the Kabbalah to find that, instead of the words as they now stand translated, it is, then began men to call themselves Jehovah, which is the correct translation, and not, then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. I have not done this particular word study. This is not something that was on my radar when we went through Genesis. This is possible. It is also not possible. there are many things that can be discovered from the word studies, right? We found that when God said, let there be, every single time what he was actually saying was, I am. There are many things to be learned from word studies. That is one of the reasons we did so many of them in the Bible study. But this was not one of the ones that I even had on my radar to do, so this is possible. It is also not possible. We have seen several times so far Mrs. Blavatsky absolutely misquote the Bible. The latter being a mistranslation, whether deliberate or not. Again, the well-known passage, I have gotten a man from the Lord, should read, I have gotten a man, even Jehovah. Footnote. See source of measures. Luther translated the passage one way, the Roman Catholics quite differently. Bishop Wordsworth renders it, Cain, I have gotten Cain from Canithi. I have gotten Luther. I have gotten a man, 0, even the Lord, Jehovah. And the author of the source of measures, I have measured a man, even Jehovah. This last is the correct rendering because a famous rabbin, a Kabbalist, explained the passage to the writer in precisely this way, and because this rendering is identical with that in the Secret Doctrine of the East with regard to Brahma. In Isis Unveiled, footnote 2, says volume 2, it was explained by the writer that Cain is the son of the Lord, not of Adam, Genesis 4:1. The Lord is Adam Kadmon, the father of Yod-Shiva, Adam Eve, or Jehovah, the son of sinful thought, not the progeny of flesh and blood. She has made this argument before, and I have dismissed it before. Seth, on the other hand, is the leader and the progenitor of the races of earth, for he is the son of Adam, exoterically. But esoterically, he is the progeny of Cain and Abel, since Abel, or Habel, is a female, the counterpart and female half of the male Cain. And Adam is the collective name for man and woman. And again, this is directly misquoting what is in Genesis, right? It does not in any way, shape, or form even imply that maybe Abel was a female. At no point in there can you even make that inference. And so, yeah. Male and female, Zakar and Nakobeh, created he them, and called their name Adamu. The verses in Genesis from chapters 1 to 5 are purposely mixed up for Kabbalistic reasons. After man of Genesis chapter 1:26 and Enos, son of man of chapter 4, verse 26. After Adam, the first androgyne. After Adam, Kadmon, the sexless, the first, Logos. Adam and Eve, once separated, come, finally, Jehovah Eve and Cain Jehovah. These represent distinct root races, for millions of years elapsed between them. Hence, the Aryan and Semitic anthropographies are two leaves on the same stem. Their respective personifications and symbolic personages stand in relation to each other in this way. 1. The unknowable, referred to in various ways in Rig Vedic verse, such as naught was, called later on Parabrahm, the Ein, nothing, or the Ein Sof of the Kabbalist. And again, the Spirit of God that moves upon the face of the waters in Genesis. All these are identical. Moreover, in Genesis, chapter 1, verse 2 is placed as verse 1 in the secret Kabbalistic text, where it is followed by the Elohim, creating the heavens and the earth. This deliberate shifting of the order of the verses was necessary for the monotheistic and Kabbalistic purposes. Jeremiah's curse against these Elohim, gods who have not created the heavens and the earth, shows that there were other Elohim who had. or that there was a creator outside of the Elohim. 2. The heavenly Manu Swayambhuva, who sprang from Swayambhu Narayana, the self-existent, and Adam Kadmon of the Kabbalist, and the androgyne man of Genesis chapter 1 are also identical. 3. Manu Swayambhuva is Brahma, or the Logos, and he is Adam Kadmon, who in Genesis 4:5 separates himself into two halves, male and female, thus becoming Yahovah or Yehovah Eve, as Manu Swayambhuva or Brahma separates himself to become Brahma Viraj and Vak Viraj, male and female. All the rest of the text and versions being blinds. 4. Vak is the daughter of Brahma and is named Satarupa, the hundred-formed, and Savitri, generatrix, the mother of the gods and all living. She is identical with Eve, the mother of all the lords or gods of all living. Besides this, there are many other occult meanings. What is written in Isis, although scattered about and very cautiously expressed at the time, is correct. Explaining esoterically Ezekiel's will, Isis Unveiled, Volume 2, it is said of Yod-Heva, or Jehovah. When the ternary is taken in the beginning of the tetragram, it expresses the divine creation spiritually, without any carnal sin. Taking at its opposite end, it expresses the latter. It is feminine. The name of Eva is composed of 3 letters. That of the primitive or heavenly Adam is written with 1 letter, Yod or Yod. Therefore it must not be read Yehovah, but Aiva or Eve. The Adam of the first chapter is the spiritual, therefore pure, androgyne Adam Kadmon. When woman issues from the rib of the second Adam, of dust, the pure Virgo is separated and falling into generation, or the downward cycle, becomes Scorpio, emblem of sin and matter, while the ascending cycle points to the purely spiritual races, or the 10 pre-diluvian patriarchs. The Prajapatis and Sephiroth are led on by the creative deity itself, who is Adam Kadmon, or Yod Kiva. Spiritually, the lower one, Yehovah, is that of the terrestrial races, led on by Enoch or Libra, the 7th, who, because he is half divine, half terrestrial, is said to have been taken by God alive. Enoch, Hermes, and Libra are one, and apparently so is Gemini. This is only one of the several meanings. No need to remind the scholar that Scorpio is the astrological sign of the organs of reproduction. Like the Indian rishis, the patriarchs are all convertible in their numbers, as well as interchangeable. According to the subject to which they relate, they become 10, 12, 7, or 5, even 14, and they have the same esoteric meaning as the Manus or rishis. If this were truth, right, if this were true knowledge, they would not have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different numbers attached to them. It would be one number with no mutability, if it were true. Moreover, Yehovah, as may be shown, has a variety of etymologies, but only those are true which are found in the Kabbalah. Aivi is the Old Testament term and was pronounced Yavah. Edmund suggests that it is contracted from the 2 words Yah-ho-Aya, Yah-ho-Yah, or Yah-ho-is-Yah. Punctuated it is, which is, however, a rabbinical priest who associated with the name Adonai, or which has the same points. Those don't look anything the same to me. It is curious, and indeed hardly conceivable, that the Jews anciently read the name Adonai when they had so many names of which Yeho and Yah and Aya constituted a part. But so it was, and Philo-Bibulus, who gives us the so-called fragment of Senconiathon, spelt it in Greek letters, Yavo or Yavo. Theodoret says that the Samaritans pronounced Yava and the Jews Yaho. Professor Gibbs, however, suggests this punctuation thus, Yehovi, and he cut the Gordian knot of its true occult meaning. For in this last form, as a Hebrew verb, it means he will be. Footnote. See for comparison, Hosea, where it is so punctuated. It was also derived from the Chaldaic verb, or Iu, Eva, or Iua, Eva, to be. And so it was, since from Enosh, the Son of Man, only, were the truly human races to begin and to be, as males and females. This statement receives further corroboration inasmuch as Parkhurst makes the verb to mean. We're going to pause right here before we get there. Right, this is talking about Enoch, right, the Son of Man, and it is very important to note that there were several generations of man prior to Enoch, right? The truly human races to begin to be as male and females. Enoch was perfect in his generations, means that there were generations to be perfect in. Inasmuch as Parkhurst makes the verb to mean, to fall down, i.e. into generation or matter, and to be, to continue as a race. The aspirate of the word Eva, to be, being, Heva, Eve, which is the feminine of, and the same as Hebe, the Grecian goddess of youth and the Olympian bride of Heracles, makes the name Jehovah appear still more clearly in its primitive double-sexed form. Finding in Sanskrit such syllables as Ya and Ya, e.g., Ya, Navi, Ganges, and Yaganatha, Lord of the World, it becomes clear why Mr. Rawlinson is so very confident in his works of an Aryan or Vedic influence on the early mythology of Babylon. Nor is it to be much wondered at that the alleged 10 tribes of Israel disappeared during the captivity period without leaving a trace behind them. When we are informed that the Jews had de facto but 2 tribes, those of Judah and Levi. The Levites, moreover, were not a tribe at all, but a priestly caste. The descendants have only followed their progenitors, the various patriarchs, into thin sidereal air. There were born Brahms and Abrams in days of old, truly, and before the first Jew had been born. Every nation held its first god and gods to be androgynous, nor could it be otherwise, since they regarded their distant primeval progenitors, their dual-sexed ancestors, as divine beings and gods, just as the Chinese do to this day. That is a misrepresentation of what the Chinese do. And they were, and they're divine in one sense, as also were their first human progeny, the mind-born primitive humanity, which were most assuredly bisexuals, as all the more ancient symbols and traditions show. Under the emblematical devices and peculiar phraseology of the priesthood of old lie latent hints of sciences as yet undiscovered during the present cycle. Well acquainted as may be a scholar with the hieratic writings and hieroglyphical system of the Egyptians, he must, first of all, learn to sift their records. He has to assure himself, compasses and rule in hand, that the picture writing he is examining fits to a line certain fixed geometrical figures which are the hidden keys to such records before he ventures on an interpretation. But there are myths which speak for themselves. In this class we may include the double-sexed first creators of every cosmogony, the Greek Zeus Zen, ether, and Chthoniya, the chaotic earth, and Metis, water. His wives, Osiris and Isis Latona, the former god also representing ether, the first emanation of the supreme deity, Amun, the primeval source of light, the goddess earth and water again, Mithras, the rock-born god, the symbol of the male mundane fire, or the personified primordial light, and Mithra, the fire goddess, at once his mother and his wife, the pure element of fire, the active or male principle, regarded as light and heat, in conjunction with earth and water or matter, the female or passive element of cosmical generation. All these are records of the primeval divine hermaphrodite. And that is going to bring us to the end of the evolution of the second race. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I do not believe that we necessarily had to evolve from hermaphrodites. To me, the explanation of male and female being in the same God is a simple one. God is beyond sexes. To me, that is simply how it is. All things create both or contain both masculine and feminine. All things contain both positive and negative, both generative and nurturing, both light and dark. Because all things contain this, of course, a personification of the deity that created all of this is going to contain all of it. And so it makes sense that they would see this creator God that they are imagining as having human characteristics as having both. That makes absolute sense. It is a deductive reasoning of man. Probably the first deductive reasoning of man about God was, well, there's a man here and there's a woman here. God must represent us both. To me, it really is that simple. To me, it does not require that first there is God and then there is an angel and then the angel creates from itself something and then that something creates something else which then creates us. That's not a necessity. It can be. It's fine to speculate about, but it is not a necessity. There is no empirical proof whatsoever that at any point in time the standard for humanity was hermaphroditism. The separation between the sexes is the Y chromosome. Males contain X and Y, females contain X and X. It is through the combination of the male Y with a female X that we have male progeny. The fact that we have the X can account for the nipples. The fact that we have the Y can account for the differentiation that is definitely there, but I really wish YouTube was not like it is, because there's not a whole lot of difference between male and female genitalia in the specifics, right? Or not necessarily the specifics, in the generalities, right? The androgyny, the clitoris and the penis, for example, are only separated by size. The shape, structure, and even the function are mostly the same. The vulva is simply a nutsack without nuts, right? There are many similarities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there was ever a hermaphroditic existence for humanity. It's possible that, nothing's beyond the realm of speculation, but we have zero reason to believe that these hermaphrodites were actually able to reproduce with themselves, which would be absolutely a necessity, right? The hermaphroditic humans that we have now, they don't have that capacity. You cannot self-impregnate. As far as I am aware, I can be wrong on that. I have not spent an awful lot of time studying that. But on its face, if it were possible, the genetic mutation that would come out of that would probably be monstrous, right? Immediately not recognizable as human. If you are using the same DNA to create in a sexual manner, you're probably going to wind up with something wild. That is something that has been recorded in history. Some of that can be explained in other ways, but There is no empirical reason to believe that at any point in time humanity's normal state of existence was hermaphroditic. There's not. You can speculate about it because people speculated that God was a hermaphrodite, but there is a good explanation for that. It may not be the correct one, but it is one, and it's probably a better one. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that I said in here. If you drop it in the comments down below and it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see discussed in the manner that we are doing, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks or even a membership. The bills do not pay themselves. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.